Hi friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com again, and I'm particularly excited about today's video because I thought it would be very interesting for myself as well as to share with others the process of modern day tarot creators and how they create a prototype or an advanced copy, send it out to a handful of people to say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? How can we improve it? And then taking that information that they get from people like myself, and then putting the fine tuning to the final deck. And so the reason that I'm using Artisan Tarot is because I've been privileged to receive advanced copies of their Conver and their Noblet, and also their Dodal decks. Now, the folks over at Artisan Tarot are Kristen Condor and William Rader, and I like supporting them. Not only do they do send me advanced copies, but I always purchase and support their Kickstarter campaigns always. I don't just take, I'm happy to support this group. Now, I'm a little nervous because I don't want to accidentally confuse the two decks, So, bear with me if I go a little slow. I did put them in the same order so that we're looking, at the same cards at the same time. So I did do that. Their boxes are the same except for the bottom of the finished product has the barcode and, their information. But the backs appear to be identical, as are the fronts. And inside, there's a card with the prototype saying that it's a review deck. Okay. Now, with the finished product, we have the same card, except that it tells us that they did 2,000. And then a little bit of information about them and where to support them, where to buy their decks and support their Kickstarters, which they do have one live right now for Dodal. Okie doke. So here we go. So in this Fool, I don't necessarily see a difference in anything. But, that's not to say that they changed every single card, And some of you might actually catch something that I don't catch because you're seeing them side by side, but I'm seeing them through the lens of a camera. So my vantage point probably isn't even as good as yours. Now, when you take a historic deck, and the TDM style is a historic deck, you take on a certain, level of, I don't want to say responsibility, but I guess one could say responsibility of, preserving the feel and the integrity of the deck, but bringing it into, the 21st century, to make it be a deck that readers will grab and use, It's true with the modern day publishing options that the tarot decks have a different proportion than the original TDM decks did of 2-to-1, twice as tall as it is wide. But that doesn't offend me at all. Okay, so we do see a difference. We have a green hood for this pilgrim, and it's been matched to what the other guy was wearing. So that's a minor tweak. I forget my line of thought, what I was saying before. That happens. Oh, I was talking about the the proportion of the cards to the that particular ratio. And I said it doesn't bother me. My goal, I want to use the cards, I know what the cards mean. Certainly every deck brings something to a reading. And so the idiosyncrasies of each deck contributes to how you might overall end up reading it. But I want to, I'm grateful for a card stock that is, supreme. The card stock of all Artisan decks is sublime. I mean, we have the linen finish, which is wonderful. And these cards shuffle like a dream, and I'm happy for what they bring to the table. I'm not seeing a whole lot of difference between that. It seems like they okay, here in the Hanged Man they added the tufts of yellow grass, where here they have it drawn in but they don't have it colored. So it doesn't look as though they made a whole lot of changes in the Conver between their prototype and the final piece. And, if you were to compare any of their decks with the originals that are housed in some cases museums, some cases libraries, they use as their source the original. They're not using anybody's copy as their source. They're using the original, as they are preserved. And the adjustments or the tweaks or the changes that they make are ones they make maybe to clarify a little bit of what they imagined might have been the intent. As in, and we see that in the clothing, and sometimes in the landscapes. They when there's a lot of landscape in a card, I've noticed that Artisan takes pains in trying to make the landscape less abstract. And the same with their clothing. And anybody who's seen any of my videos with Artisan knows, that I've commented on how they clarify clothing. So their goal is not to just take a picture of the deck and put it out there. I mean, I guess anybody really can do that. And just like any other card maker who is making it either by hand or drawing, even if they're using a computer process, it still requires drawing, right? So, they're painstaking. It's a painstaking process, and trying to understand what they're looking at sometimes is I'm sure, a challenge. Now, I do believe that I've done a video comparing the Artisan Conver to a more facsimile deck put out by Yves Renaud. So if you are interested in knowing how the more facsimile deck looks compared to the Artisan Conver, by all means, go check out that video. I have it, I have it somewhere in my playlists. But bear in mind, too, that even people who take photographs and just, take a photograph and present it as a deck, even they have to tweak the light, or they have to do something to make the original palatable, because sometimes the images are so dark, there has to be some wizardry, right, in the lighting process. So it's very rare to have a copy of a deck that is an exact facsimile, although there are some. Now, with the Artisan group, what we see in the swords and the batons, that we don't see in the historic decks, is a real cleaning up, and a consistency in the thickness of line, and then in the in how the swords and the batons interlace with one another. Okay, so I'm going to put this like this, because I didn't change the direction of this, but this deck may have gotten shuffled up. So I'm not seeing a whole lot of difference between the mock-up deck and the final deck. I believe that there are more changes made to some of the other decks that they've made. I haven't gotten the Noblet deck yet. That is forthcoming. It'll be soonish, I'm sure. And then, of course, the current Kickstarter they have for the Jean Dodal is in the process of, they're still doing the Kickstarter. So if you are, pleased by the quality of their decks, if you ever have, if you bought the Conver and you received it, or if you've seen my videos and you like what you see, you can get in on the Kickstarter for the Jean Dodal. Yeah, I'm not seeing a whole lot of difference, either in color or changes made. If you catch things that I didn't mention, please let me know. They changed the green. Okay, so you'll notice here, and I don't know if it was in the other cards as well, but I noticed here that their prototype had a green, and this has been changed to blue. And they did that also here in the shield. They took the green and made it blue. So I come to the tarot world, I think, from a unique perspective. I was the rare American who's always read from Pip style decks, which is really rare. It's really something to say, you know, because, and there are a few of us, I'm not saying there aren't, but for the most part, the historic decks were really not big in our culture. In the late 60s, I think 1968, the first tarot deck was seen on American television. That was the one J.J. Swiss. It was seen on the Dark Shadows show. And that's where I first saw it. And I was, 10 years old. And I was just like, what is that? What are those cards? And I thought they were gorgeous. A number of years later, I was a teenager going to a mall looking for a record. And I stumble in I think it was a Spain's gift shop or Spencer's or something like that, a novelty shop. And I saw the exact same deck, the one J.J. Swiss. So I bought the deck. And I was hooked ever since. And I used that deck exclusively for a number of years because there weren't any other decks. And then in the 70s, or maybe 72 or something like that, there were, in those days they called it the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, came out. And so I bought a couple decks like that, because that's the only tarot that was being sold, and I was curious about it, but my affinity was for the pip style decks because that's what I started using, and that's what I loved. Right? So what you like, you know what you like, what you respond to, and that's what I responded to. And it was hard through the years getting information on pip style cards or how to read them because, I wasn't living in Europe. It wasn't like I was in Europe and, it was part of our culture. It wasn't. And most of the books that I could get my hands on had to do with Rider-Waite-Smith interpretations, So I've discussed this a number of times in a number of videos. I had to come up with my own way of doing things. And I did. And I share it all the time on videos. So if you want to know how I read the cards, all you have to do is look through my playlist and find, demonstration readings using tarot cards. And they're all, with the exception of one or two, they're all using pip style decks. And people ask me too, and I'll probably do a video after this on this next topic, what's a good deck for a beginner, So in some ways, maybe, Rider-Waite-Smith would be a good deck for a beginner because it's got pictures on every card and the pictures kind of tell the story, right? But if you want to know what I think as far as learning tarot and what would be good for a beginner, I would always say, I would encourage you to do pip style cards because if you can read them, you can read anything, number one. And, there's a certain amount of freedom in, when you see a Three of Swords or you see a Ten of Swords in a pip style deck, you're not stuck with the picture of disharmony or pain or suffering, right? I mean, if you associate number with suit, which is what pip style cards are. I mean, what's this card about? This card is about the number 10 with 10 staves or batons. That's what it's about, right? Any picture that somebody puts on this is their own idea of what the number 10 means, along with 10 batons. So you have to decide what the number 10 means in connection with the suit of batons. And some people who read pip style cards never even consider number and suit because they say they just read the pattern or they read, just read how it looks, which who's to say that's a fine way to do it. I'm not criticizing them, but my way is to recognize what's on the card, and then, take the information that the card gives me and come up with a system. And my system was to combine number with suit. But I'll save what more I have to say about picking a deck that's, that's a good first deck, because that's worth a video by itself. Okay, now with this card, we do see that their prototype has a green wreath, which may or may not have really been, how it would have appeared. But they either reverted to what the original deck had, or they decided that it's more aesthetically pleasing to have it this way. I think it is more aesthetically pleasing this way. So maybe they put this in because they figured it really would have been green, but it doesn't really look as good, does it? And okay, we see again, the green is now blue. The green of the... So if I do ever switch up the cards accidentally, I'll know that if it's got green in it, it's the prototype. Again, we see the green versus the blue. And they are the exact same size. I know that the perspective, if I don't hold them perfectly, it might appear that one deck is bigger than the other, but they're the same. Now, it's a very cloudy day in my tarot parlor, so I'm not even sure if the colors are the same. I don't see, from my perspective, a great shift in color. So with the exception of the green to blue, I don't know that they've changed the color. So I'm thinking that based on what we're looking at for the Conver deck, there wasn't a whole lot of difference between their prototype and their final product. But I do believe some of the other decks did have more changes due to the color. I think they toned, in the Noblet and in the Artisan Dodal, they may have toned down some color, and they may have just made a few other tweaks. And yeah, I don't see any difference in color. So I think they kept the same palette with the exception of green to blue. They do a beautiful job, as a reader, I'm very happy to have cards that I can shuffle with abandon, read, use them every day, and not concern myself with, destroying them by use. I mean, some of the historic cards, although they may, be as close to facsimiles as one can get, you can't use them every day without expecting them to wear out and get damaged. I'm quickly putting them back in their proper boxes before I confuse which deck is which deck. So I hope it was an interesting thing for you to see, the difference between a prototype and the final product, at least for the Artisan group. I'll do another video doing the same kind of comparison when I receive their Noblet, probably in a month or two, and then the Dodal when that becomes available. And they have so many other decks on the horizon that I'm very excited for them, and I'm excited to have their decks. And until next time, friends, peace and stay well.